Hi everyone, today we're going to learn about rational numbers, squares, cubes, and roots, square roots and cube roots. So let me just remind you that natural numbers are the numbers such as 1, 2, and 3. Whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, and so on. And integers can be negative as well. So we have the negative, negative 2, negative 1, 0, and 1, 2, and so on. So you should know these. And now we're going to start on what is a rational number. So what is a rational number? A rational number is any number that you can write as a fraction, a over b, but you have to make sure that a and b are integers and the b cannot be equal to 0. In other words, the denominator cannot be equal to 0. So what do you think? Can A or B be fractions or decimals? And the answer is no. And can A equal 0? Yes. If A is equal to 0, the fraction becomes equal to 0. So I have a few numbers and we're just going to put them in the right place. Make sure you know what it is to be a rational number. Remember that A over B, A and B both have to be integers. So the first one is 8 over 3, and yes, it is a rational number. The next one is 0.5. Even though 0.5 does not look like a fraction, we can write it as 1 over 2. So it is a rational number. The square root of 6, if you do this in the calculator, you get a decimal, and the square root of 6 cannot be written as a over b. So this is an irrational number. Negative 1 and 1/3 is just negative 4 over 3, so that's a yes. Negative 1 over 5 is negative 1/5, and that's a yes. 1 over negative 5, which is the same as negative 1/5, is also a yes. The square root of 4, which is 2, and that is rational. However, the square root of 5 is not rational. So let's look at a little bit of algebra. When can these algebraic terms be rational numbers? So something to think about is, remember that when we have 0 in the denominator, the fraction becomes undefined. Do you know what happens if the 0 is in the numerator? I just told you a few seconds ago. It makes the fraction equal to 0. So I have a fraction 1 over x, and 1 over x can be a rational number as long as x is an integer which is not equal to 0. What number would make the denominator equal to 0? And that is the one number we cannot have. So x cannot equal negative 1. What can x not equal here? Here, x cannot equal negative 2. And in here, what can x not equal? This is a challenge. And x cannot equal 0 or negative 1 because both of these numbers will make the denominator equal to 0. Okay, so moving on. You should know how to do this. This is fairly simple. If you are asked to graph a number on a number line, try to be as specific as possible. So 8 over 3 is 2 and 2/3. So you're going to move it to 2 and 2/3 and mark it as 8 over 3. Negative 4, negative 1 and 1/3 is negative 1 and 1/3 over here, and you're going to mark it and so on. You should be fairly good at this. I'm not spending time here. But remember that radical 4 is 2, and we're only looking at the positive square root. So you can do that. I know you're honors kids. So then what is an irrational number? An irrational number is a number that cannot be written as a ratio, where a and b are integers and b is not equal to 0. So in this case, in its decimal form, an irrational number is a decimal that is non-repeating and non-terminating. And some examples are when you have the square root of a number that is not a perfect square, such as square root of 15. And we know that 15 is not a perfect square. This one, when you have a square root of a negative number, that is an irrational number. We don't know how to find the square root of negative 10. That is actually an imaginary number, which you will do later on. So the number inside the square root is called the radicand. And when the radicand is not a perfect square, the number is irrational, such as radical 5, radical 6, radical 7, radical 8. But when you get to 9, radical 9 is equal to 3, and that is a rational number. You might be familiar with pi, which is a famous irrational number. And of course, you should know how to graph it. So moving on to squares, what is a perfect square? When you take a number and you multiply it by itself, you get a perfect square, such as 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4. So 1 is a perfect square, 4 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square. And it's a perfect square because you can make a square when you graph it. So x times x is also a perfect square, give you a perfect square, which is x squared. 2 times 2 will give you 2 squared, which is a perfect square. 1/5 times 1/5 will give you 1 over 25. And this will give you 0.09, sorry. So those are squares. Square root is the opposite of squaring. And remember that we are only looking for the positive square root. So the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 1 over 36 is 1 over 6. And the square root of 0.0121, because 121 is coming from 11, you have to think a little, and the answer is 0.11. And all of these are rational numbers because these are the square roots of numbers that are perfect squares. So what are cubes? So cubes are when we multiply a number by itself 3 times. So x times x times x is x cubed. 2 times 2 times 2 is 2 cubed, and so on. So then when you want to find cube roots, you have to think about which number has been multiplied 3 times to give me 8. So the cube root of 8 is coming from 2. The cube root of 1/8 is 1 over 2. And the cube root of 0.008 is 0.02. And that is it. And I need you to memorize the squares and the cubes from the numbers 1 through 25. That is it. I will see you in class. Goodbye.